Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, on the Wednesday evening, the day after the 7.31 patch, which introduced the second step of the Relic Weapon questline, and this so-called concept of Relic Roulettes, one could say. This set is also a bit special, as I will be discontinuing the one job per set Wheel of Jobs style in pursuit of something more varied. As a result, in this set, we'll be using the wheel to choose each job, one duty per job, guild tests don't count, and jokers mean I get to pick myself. And I suppose, not too surprising, this set has quite a bit of variety. With that said, for duty 1, we went to Labyrinth of the Ancients as a replacement Viper. I also wasn't the only replacement. A somewhat interesting detail is that I feel like I noticed an uptick in the amount of people that leave Crystal Tower Alliance raids, specifically with this new Relic questline releasing. It kinda toned down again after that. On the one hand, it means more people queuing for Alliance raids that might be tired of Crystal Tower. On the other hand, this early in the patch, there was a hypothesis that it was significantly better to get longer duties for your Relic. And it wasn't entirely clear yet, somehow, that the daily bonus was a fixed amount, so some players might have dodged to make sure they maximized the value of their daily. With all that said though, this might have been my smoothest Labyrinth run in a long time. We had a Narnia dragon and not a single skeleton made it through. We had pretty much no waiting on the Atomos. Of course, we cleared Thanatos before Alliance C got to participate. We had only one death on Behemoth, and cleared Phlegethon so fast he didn't even get to start casting the second Ancient Flare. For duty 2, we went to Snowcloak as Samurai. Overall, the duty went well, and reasonably fast, but it felt like the tank was a bit weird on some pulls, which also was reflected in their somewhat sporadic defensive cooldown use. At the same time, the healer also seemed a bit extra careful, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. On top of that, I don't think they know that Art of War is a gain on 1 at this level. That said, as mentioned, overall, the duty went well and reasonably fast. For duty 3, we went to A4N, Alexander's Manipulator, as Bard. And Bew the Scholar knew me. Hello! Extremely conveniently, it felt like there was no point in the fight where the stops and starts got in the way of my rotation specifically. And again, since it seems like the whole team was bringing the heat, we pushed through fast, furious, and safe. For duty 4, we went to Acquaintance Households as Dancer. Once again, the ridiculous standard finishes turbo us through the duty. For duty 5, we went to Light and Fist. I noticed this run went particularly slow for this kind of duty, which does make sense when we look a bit closer. The Gunbreaker really liked to use Demon Slice, both to pick up the boss, but also to attempt to pick up anything else that spawned, which loses them a ton of damage. Simultaneously, the Red Mage often spent long periods of time just running away instead of attacking, losing them a ton of damage. The main thing that made me notice is that normally I don't think I would get to use 3 standard finishes in a fight like this. For duty 6, we went to Ramuh Extreme again as Dancer. After a bit of talk, it seemed like most of the raid knew exactly what to do, although one of the healers was concerned. But since we all were on the same page, we decided to give it a go before discussing strategy. Overall, I'd say everyone pretty much nails the mechanics. The tanks efficiently alternate tanking. Everyone contributes here and there to maintain not too many orbs on the field without removing too many. Everyone makes sure to get to the marker for the Horrify mechanic, and it seems like everyone even helped with the ads properly. I think the Astrologians even made sure to stagger their raid buffs so they didn't overlap, which also leads to a really small optimization you can make as a Dancer at this level. While Dancer itself doesn't have any temporary damage buffs at level 50 to put their fan dances in, if someone else does, you can always use up to 3 fan dances in bursts during those. In this group in particular, a Spear and/or Divination is a great time to use some fan dances. A particularly convenient set of circumstances in the final phase was also that Rolling Thunder targeted me and a Summoner, which made it easier to decide who goes for the orbs. The more mobile physical ranged, of course. And this was also overlapped with us both being horrified, so we didn't have to worry about that factor either. This may not have been the perfect Ramuh Extreme run, but all things considered, it was really close. Also, there's something funny about the fact we had 2 dancers, 2 summoners, and 2 astrologians. Well done, team. For duty 7, we went to A12N, Alexander, as Black Mage. During the ad phase bit, I and the dancer get put in danger by the big ads, which is a common occurrence if the tanks aren't quick to pick them up. For the tank limit break bit, the tanks got the LB up as late as absolutely possible, I'm pretty sure, but we of course survived. For the bit with the time holes, strangely, we have both of the healers inside, leaving the tanks in huge trouble outside, which does lead to one of them dying from a simple case of lack of heals. We work together fast and make it out fast enough to save what's left of the party though. In the very last moments of the fight, I end up sacrificing myself to save a healer who was otherwise alone in a stack marker, and then we finish up the fight. For duty 8, we went to Aetherfont as warrior. Overall, the duty went fine, but there was definitely something weird with both the healer and the black mage, so let's talk a bit about that. First, the black mage seemed to incorporate Scathe quite a lot in their rotation. You can mainly see this by how their MP moves at certain points. They also seem to be almost allergic to hitting 0 MP, preferring to go with Blizzard 2 Freeze, Fire 2 Flare looping rotation to avoid running out completely. Notice, not double flare, just a single one. They also didn't seem to use Umbral Soul when not in combat, leading to starting fights not at max MP. Overall, these things all add up to slowing down fights, leading us to see mechanics on bosses that don't normally happen, and causing AoE pulls to go on a bit longer than expected. On the healer's end, I don't think I saw them cast Dyscrasia a single time in the entire duty. They might have, but I didn't see it at least. This was particularly strange because they were using Yevcration Dyscrasia, and they were using Nevma seemingly for just the damage. But for filler AoE, it looked like their preferred method was E-Diag Toxicon. While technically at this level, Toxicon is a very minor gain on AoE, something that is incredibly important to keep in mind is that E-Diag does 0 damage, so 2 Dyscrasias is way better than E-Diag and Toxicon, unless you actually need the healing and shield, which means there could be some situation where it is alright, but this is not that. I ended up not needing most of my cooldowns due to the Sage overworking on the defensive to help me. Meanwhile, did you know that Warrior can solo Aetherfont synced? For duty 9, we went to Drowned City of Skalla as Gunbreaker, and Yasla the White Mage knew me. Hello! And this was another super solid team, so let's instead take a little tip for each boss. The first boss, Kelpie, will at some point use Hydra Push or Hydra Pull, doing one and then the next time the other. If you have a gap closer, like for instance Trajectory that Gunbreaker has, then I recommend using that for Hydro Push and saving your knockback immunity for Hydro Pull. That way, as a melee job, you can just stay in melee range the whole time. For the second boss, try to take note of where the dolls spawn when you're turned into Spriggans, as you can preemptively place the first bomb to make that section faster. Of course, it won't really make that section much faster if you're the only one doing it, but it might help a bit. On the final boss, take note that both the frontal cleave with the claw and the backside cleave with the tail can be dodged by just stepping aside once the boss gets into position. Overall, as I said, the duty goes super well. For duty 10, we hit a Joker, so I decide to play Pictomancer, and we land in Hostile Dance. And the tank seemed like they might actually have been pressing actions completely randomly, including randomly turning on and off the tank stance. I tried to clarify to use Total Eclipse specifically, but I don't know what to say beyond they might have gone completely random. For duty 11, we went to Turtle Nap Time, and all I can really say here is that it seems like everyone was on the same page, so we sped through extra fast. For duty 12, we went to Garuda Hard. A tip for this boss as Pictomancer is to make sure you use your muses ASAP, as each time Garuda leaves is a great opportunity to paint something for free, one could say. I even tried to get clever by overlapping the moment of the first plume spawning with me using both Winged Muse and Mark of the Ages, but it didn't quite kill them, so it wasn't as awesome as I had hoped. Aside from this, the duty went very well, of course. For duty 13, we hit another Joker, so I decided to play Skalla and we land in Aurum Vale. It was quite funny because the tank was pretty solid, but almost every time they tried to do something clever, it went slightly sideways. Notable examples include trying to skip mobs leading up to the second boss, which, by the way, normally works, but this time just didn't. Or skipping mobs after the second boss, which sometimes works, but also just didn't this time. Throughout the duty, I'm also not entirely sure if the Black Mage either didn't know how the fruits worked, or just didn't care, considering they didn't die as a result of ignoring them in battle. Despite the weird mess-ups and confusion, we still managed to get through with no deaths at a good pace. For duty 14, we were an 8-minute replacement on Titania as Astrologian. I'm guessing that something randomly unexpected went wrong which led to a wipe, because overall the group was really good, so no reason to leave over that. As a result, I got a lot of time to mess around with optimizing my Astrologian play a bunch. So not only did I get to focus on setting up my burst windows nicely, but I think I got most of the celestial intersections I was offered spent, which is often a detail I forget. It really adds up, as celestial intersection is effectively 600 potency worth of healing and shields on a measly 30-second cooldown. And because most of the healing is a barrier that lasts a whole 30 seconds, if the barrier doesn't get spent, you didn't really lose anything, not to mention it is hard to overheal with. The real problem is remembering to weave it every 30 seconds, but since we didn't have any issues dealing with the ad phase at all, and no one died at any point, I'm really not sure what went wrong that led to the first wipe, but we still made it through nice and clean. For duty 15, we hit the Joker again and pick Paladin, and land as an instant replacement in Strayborough Deadwalk. And this was probably the slowest run of every boss in this dungeon I've ever been a part of, at least since like launch of Dawntrail. On the first boss, as far as I can see, all of us end up getting benoggined at least once at some point. Also, I certainly didn't remember this, but it seems like after the second Team Spirit, the third and beyond, the children dash across more than twice. It looks like they ran 3 if not 4 times each. Absolutely cursed. Similarly, on the second boss, it was at around 20% when the third set of teacups resolved, which is where that mechanic becomes weird and hard to predict. And on the final boss, it was at around 46% HP by the time the line stack went out. That usually coincides with around when the fight ends in an average party. At one point near the end, I even used Phoenix down to get the healer back up after my entire party died. Like, arguably, all 3 of my companions seemed to have trouble, but in particular, the bard seemed to not be bringing it very much. It seemed like they basically never used Raging Strikes or Battle Voice, just for starters. Not to mention basically never using Radiant Finale. All these things add up, but that combined with the amount of deaths on each boss certainly contributed to each fight taking a long time. For duty 16, we got the last Joker, so I chose to play Viper, and we land in Yuweyawata Field Station with, again, possibly, the slowest run of this dungeon I've been a part of in quite a while. For one, I noticed the other Viper using single target actions on AoE at times. Our healer also seemed to really like maintaining Medica 3 even when it wasn't needed. Both of these things made AoE pulls, and to some degree boss fights, longer than usual. But fortunately, we didn't have many deaths, so we still progressed through at a steady pace. To try and put it a bit into perspective, the final boss's mechanic with the circling AoEs on the outer ring repeated, which at least usually doesn't happen in my random groups. And finally for duty 17, we of course have Red Mage against Leviathan Extreme. The party asks for me to explain the fight, so I go over the main points to look out for, and in the meantime, one of our tanks leave and is replaced by Nana, who knew me. Awesome. That's usually a good sign. Now, on the first attempt, we make it almost to the end, but during the blue orb bit, the healers get overwhelmed by how much random damage is going out, leading to a bunch of deaths, and even if we make it to the very final bit, we still wipe as a result. On the second attempt, due to what seems to be a slightly weird distribution of work on the ads, Leviathan doesn't immediately go to the bit where the converter is required, which promptly wipes us due to this misunderstanding. On the third attempt, due to what just went wrong. I was too slow on the converter, wiping us to that instead. On the 4th attempt then, we finally get the focus on the ads mostly right, and aside from the summoner dying suddenly at one point and a few deaths right at the end, the whole party stood firm through the storm. What an amazing improvement in so little time. Well done. I found it quite interesting that due to the release of the new Relic Weapon stuff, the skill level in Expert Roulette or otherwise max level dungeons seemed a lot lower on average, while the skill level, again, on average, seemed a lot higher in most of the roulettes associated with Relic Weapons. And with that, we are at just about 43/83ths of the way to the achievement. Now, the new plan is to try and simply make the Mentor Roulette set something funny or interesting each time, instead of being beholden to the randomness of the Wheel of Jobs. I hope you will continue to enjoy. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, while the fruits in Aurum Vale are known to specifically remove the debuffs applied by the associated bosses, and also happen to be the only way to remove said debuffs since they cannot be removed with the Shuna, they actually remove all debuffs if you do eat them. On the first boss in the dungeon, this extra detail doesn't really do anything special since the boss only applies one debuff. However, if you happen to get hit by the bad breath on the final boss, eating a fruit is way more effective than waiting for your healer to issue everything off you.